So welcome to the event tonight, and I'm going to hand over to Professor Laura Parry, Pro-Vice Chancellor Research Excellence, to welcome us all here today. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Andy. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Adelaide Plains. We should really honour their enduring connection to this land and their knowledge of its soils, waterways and ecosystems, which have sustained their communities now for tens of thousands of years. And we should also recognise the wisdom of the Kaurna people in nurturing this land through sustainable practices and deep respect for its health and vitality. And as we engage in this evening's discussions, let's be inspired by this enduring knowledge and commit to ourselves to learning from their example, integrating respect for their land into our work and ensuring the prosperity of these landscapes for future generations. So I'd really like to warmly welcome you all to this very special screening of ABC Australia's Eat the Invaders, followed by what I'm understanding will be a highly interactive discussion panel and Q&A session with the scientific advisors behind this new series. And I'm extremely proud that this event is brought to you this evening by the Environment Institute at the University of Adelaide, but also thanks to the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, Biodiversity Council, ABC Impact and Partnerships, and Closer Productions, who have done an amazing job. I'm sure many of you in the audience will know that Eat the Invaders is a 6-part series examining how Australia might deal with some of its most problematic invasive species by posing a really bold question. Can we suppress hugely costly pests by turning them into dinner? Now, I have to admit, I was highly sceptical about this idea, especially eating cane toads, but I have to say I've been really enthralled by this series, and I've watched quite a number of the chapters. Hosted by Tony Armstrong and produced by Closer Productions, this series explores the really serious impact that cane toads, camels, deer, carp, rabbits, and as you'll see today, cats have wrought upon the Australian landscape and its ecosystems. And it poses this question, really, how best to control these environmental threats? Underpinned by science, Eat the Invaders provokes Australian audiences to rethink their perspectives on these familiar but harmful animals. And I'm really excited about the role that members of the University of Adelaide community have played here, providing data, modelling, ideas, and I hope that this will continue through further collaboration and partnerships, because it will take a collective effort to shift the thinking on how best to protect Australia's wonderful flora and fauna. So this evening, this event really aims to delve into thought-provoking conversation and debate around this critical issue. And we're going to start the evening with a screening of episode 5, Cats, from ABC Australia's Eat the Invaders, followed by, as I said earlier, a highly interactive and hopefully provocative discussion with some Q&A, and a chance to engage and hear from the scientific experts who are working really hard to protect the environment, and also had a great role to play in this series. And it is a great pleasure and a privilege to introduce our panel of Eat the Invaders scientific advisors. We have Professor Andy Lowe, who's Director of the Environment Institute here at the University of Adelaide. We have Professor Phil Cassie, who is our ARC Industry Laureate Fellow and Head of Invasion Science and Wildlife Ecology Group at the School of Biological Sciences and also the Environment Institute here at the University. Welcome to Jana Dielenberg, Communication and Engagement Manager of Biodiversity Council, and welcome to Dr. Alexandra Ross, an esteemed ecologist at the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. Now, the panel will discuss sort of actions and steps that we could take to mitigate threats posed by these invasive species. And I'm really hoping they're going to challenge our conventional thinking about conservation and sustainability. And you, the audience, will get a chance to ask questions of the panel at the end. But now, without further ado, let's see what all the fuss is about, eating the invaders. Thank you.
Thanks for paying attention to the programme. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a panel discussion of the scientists that you saw on screen. So I'd like to welcome up Ali, Jana and Phil, and have a seat here. We were quite involved in the kind of background and scientific basis of the whole series, particularly with myself and Phil. And I just want to give a shout out to Matt and Poppy, who are just over here. They're just going to wave their hands around so you can see. And Matt and Poppy were really the creators of the series. They're with Closer Productions, and they're based here in South Australia. So it was a great privilege for us to be able to work with you guys on the series. And I think this was a kind of difficult topic around invasive species. We know we've thrown a lot of money at the control of invasive species, and the problem is still getting worse. And in many cases, thank you. In many cases, the general public has become bored of the invasive species debate, or doesn't know the difference between invasive species and native species. How can you love what you don't know? I think was one of the comments that you said, Jana. So I think for this program, to drive a line between actually an intentionally controversial approach, which is should we eat these species? I mean, clearly we're not promoting eating cat, right? But it's a challenging idea to think about the topic. And then with that challenge and with the artistic narrative around the chef and the cooking, you can Trojan horse scientific information and then have the discussion, an open discussion around how we should be controlling these invasives and what the key problems are with these invasive species. So the program hasn't been without controversy, and I think we can touch on that a little bit with the panel discussion tonight. And so we're just going to have a short panel discussion, and then we'll throw it to the audience for a Q&A session as well. So, but first of all, I'm going to get the panel to introduce themselves. So, Ali.
Howdy, my name's Ali. I'm from the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. We do a lot of, our mission is the successful conservation of all of Australia's native species. So you saw where I live, which is up at Yucumara, which is only 2 hours north of here. So we do a lot of management of things like fire, weeds, and also introduced species. So that includes feral cats on all of our properties across Australia.
Great. And Jana?
Hi, I'm Jana Dielenberg. I'm with the Biodiversity Council. The council was founded by 11 Australian universities to promote evidence-based solutions to Australia's biodiversity loss crisis. And amongst our councillors, we have Professor John Wojnarski and Professor Sarah Legg, who've led a lot of the really pivotal work that's happened in Australia over the last 20 years to understand the impact of cats on the Australian landscape and its wildlife. And so we often are involved in presenting the evidence with regard to the impact of cats and how we can best manage them.
Thanks. And Phil?
I'm an invasion ecologist here at the University of Adelaide, and it was a real pleasure to be involved in this production.
And you're Phil Cassie?
I'm Phil Cassie.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Did I not say that?
No.
Okay.
I think your microphone must have been switched off.
Right.
At the time.
I just assumed everyone knew who I was.
So I think we'll start, Ali, because you were there at the start of the program, just showing us some amazing landscapes. And tell us a little bit more about the impact of cats and what you do on AWC properties to help control them.
I mean, there were a lot of numbers in that episode that you got to see, but the one we come back to is 3 billion native animals every single year. So to try and put that in perspective, that would be like a big alien spaceship coming to Australia and killing every single person in the country 100 times, every year forever. And then still with a bit of murder left over for dessert. So huge impact that each cat is having. The problem that we have is that all our numbers are estimates. We have a really tough time knowing how many cats we have in Australia, and then a further tough time knowing each impact of each cat. So at Arid Recovery, which is right in the middle of Australia, they've put some cameras on feral cats, and that way you can see what they're killing regardless of whether or not it's in their stomach. So very easy to see what's in a cat's stomach, as you saw from that episode. But it was really interesting to see animals that are killed that aren't eaten, because cats, I don't know if any of you have cats at home, but have you ever played with the little toys on a string or whatever, and the pupils go really big? That is because you own a murder machine and it wants to kill. And often that's to kill things without eating them. They kill in excess of what they need. So the impact on on native species can be quite severe, and is often more than what you can see just from numbers in cat stomachs as well.
And so if eating them isn't the answer, how do you control them out on your properties?
So we have a number of properties around Australia, and the way we manage cats really depends on what we're trying to achieve on a particular property. So cats are really difficult in that there's no landscape scale management method. So some of you might be aware of, rabbits. We have a virus that we can release which can impact a population away from the release site. But with cats, it's almost a case-by-case basis. So again, they are murder machines, so they do want to kill something alive. So it's really difficult to set a cage trap and then get a cat to go into a cage trap with just a piece of chicken or something in there. So you have to get a little bit creative sometimes if you want to catch a cat. So I've used things like, for not the kids in the room, but for everybody else, remember CDs? So if you hang a CD up in the night, that'll turn and catch the reflection of the moon, and cats are quite curious, and curiosity can kill the cat, fortunately. So if you put a hanging CD above a bucket of sand and put a leg hold trap in the bucket of sand, then that means you're not going to get any native kangaroos or something jumping up onto it, but a cat will jump up there to see the CD. I've also used like feather boas.
Quite inventive.
Oh, you have to be inventive. Yeah, they're very smart, and you have to outsmart them sometimes. Yeah, so that's to catch a cat. We also use baits. We use firearms. Whatever you have to manage a cat in a system. Some of you might be aware of a device called a Felixer, which is essentially a camera and an AI now attached to lasers and a system of releasing 1080 poison, so that if a cat passes in front of the Felixer, the lasers, the AI, the cameras will identify that as a cat and not a koala or a kangaroo or anything. And the 1080 is sprayed onto the animal, and cats groom themselves, so they will groom that 1080 off. So 1080 is a good bait to use because it's Australian, so there is some level of resistance to native species if we did accidentally get a native species, and native species also don't groom themselves like cats do. So that's a method of using in an environment, but very expensive, so difficult to use. So again, do whatever you can to get rid of cats if that's the thing you're trying to manage in your property.
So something like a static Dalek is how I've referred to the Felixer. Yeah. And you also, obviously your properties are fenced as well, and you protect inside the property and then hunt outside the property to reduce cat numbers.
Yeah. So
can you keep the cats out of the properties?
The fences we build, they're not just normal fences. We need, a cat can climb. So on the top of a fence, you need a floppy top, so a cat will climb up and fall off, which is, very, very reasonable, I think. And then cats can dig, or foxes can dig as well. So you put skirting on the bottom of the fence, very normal. And then you also want to keep rabbits out, so you put really tight mesh at the bottom of your fence, and that'll stop like baby rabbits getting through, all very normal. And then just to put an extra incentive to stop them trying to get through the fence anyway, we add 7,000 volts. And that we found is pretty much 100% successful.
100% successful. Okay,
We've never, we haven't had an incursion at the properties that I work at.
Recommendation, if you want to keep your cats out, 7,000 volts.
That's right.
Okay, let's go with that.
It costs about $55,000 per kilometre though.
But
so.
worth it.
Yeah.
So, Jana, let's go on to you. What are the, so we've heard a bit about some specific control measures at conservation sites. What other kind of control measures could we bring in kind of in the broader landscapes?
Well, in most cases, what you're really trying to do is ask yourself, what values are you trying to protect? And so sometimes you go to that level of effort and shooting and other things. And in parts of Australia, you can do more broad-scale baiting, like 1080 baiting. 1080 is based on a chemical that is derived from plants that are more common in Western Australia. So in Western Australia, they actually have quite a lot of success with broad-scale baiting because the native animals in those areas have much higher rates of tolerance to 1080, but it isn't actually a chemical that's tolerated across all of Australia, and so lots of areas you can't do that. And so a lot of effort in research programs has gone into working out what we can do at scale to reduce the impacts of cats on native wildlife. And actually in a lot of Australia, one of the most effective things you can do is to improve habitat quality. It is the best way to keep native animals in the game, and to actually, it reduces the number of cats. So I was collaborating with big research programs in Northern Australia, where they looked at all the data about where the native mammals are occurring, where the cats are occurring. And you might think that the cats go to where the mammals are, but it's not true. The cats really like the open, degraded country, the areas where fire and feral herbivores like feral cows and things have degraded things. It makes it open country. It's very easy to catch something. And then the native mammal populations are the healthiest in the area with good complex habitat. And so it is actually really hard to get cats out. One research project that was happening in Arnhem Land, we worked with ranger teams. They were using AWC cat detection dogs, shooting, hunting, but it's rugged country. It's not like Kiwakara open desert country. And it was a 2-year project to see, can they manage to get cat numbers down enough to show a response in the native mammal populations? And in 2 years, they killed 2 cats. It's actually really hard. And so when people talk about just let out the shooters and things, I'll clean them up, it's actually really hard. Cats occur at like one feral cat often every couple of kilometres, and they're nocturnal and they're secretive. And so we really do have to be creative at landscape scales to be thinking about what's the most effective way to keep those native animals in the game. And yeah, things like habitat management are often the way that we can do it.
Great. And let's switch focus for a minute. Let's go on to domesticated cats or pet cats. They got a pretty bad rap in the program here. Tell us a little bit more about domesticated cats and the problems that they cause, and potentially what we can do about it.
Yeah, so full disclosure, cat owner here. Have an indoor cat, so don't peg me with leftover sandwiches on my way out the door. Yeah, I think that there's really growing awareness in Australia of the impact that cats have on our suburbs. And it's not just up to the cat owners. I really feel like I do quite a lot of, I've done quite a lot of radio interviews on this topic, and sometimes you've got talkback callers calling in, and at 4 a.m, I did say yes to a 4 a.m. interview once, had a lot of truck drivers calling in who going, like,
Can I run over a cat? Is that what this is?
No, saying like, I'm really mad because I used to have this beautiful family of blue tongues living in my yard, and then I got new neighbours and they've got a cat, and I've got no more blue tongues. I've got, the kookaburras have gone. And so this is why it's more than just what cat owners want to do with their own cats. I mean, it's fine whatever people want to do if they can keep it within their property. But this is why cats roaming beyond people's property is such a problem, because they do hunt, well, the vast majority hunt, and even if they're not killing things, just the act of disturbing and chasing animals. There's a case in Mandurah, there was a whole breeding population of about 100 pairs of fairy terns. It was just like, it was 2 cats, like a stray cat, and possibly the other one was feral, I'm not quite sure, but it was only 2 cats because they got them on camera, just kept going back and chasing those birds that were trying to nest, and they kept having to run off, and in the end, the whole colony, they didn't breed that year. And so just that action of going out all the time is a real problem. But I think attitudes are changing. 1/3 of cat owners keep their cats contained. If you survey cat owners, a primary driver is actually for the welfare of cats. Indoor cats live longer. They're not getting hit by cars, attacked by dogs. They're not getting into cat fights. You know, when I was much younger, we had an outdoor cat, and oh my God, it was so expensive. It was always getting abscesses from cat fights and things like that. So when, you know, we got a cat 5 years ago, we said, absolutely, we're keeping it in because we want the wildlife in our garden. We don't want our neighbours to miss out on that as well. And we also want to keep that cat safe. And so Monash University undertakes a survey for the Biodiversity Council once a year, sort of really well conducted, rigorous social research benchmarked against ABS data, so we know that it represents the views of the community, not just who chooses to do a survey. And we asked people, do you support requiring all cat owners to keep their pets contained? And 2/3 of people say, yes, that's what we want. 1/4 of Australians say, don't have an opinion. And then just 8% or 1 in 12 people say, no, people should be allowed to let their cats roam. But the interesting thing in that is 1/3 of people own cats. So it even shows that even amongst the cat owning people, they either appreciate that they should, or they're willing to accept it. And there's actually only quite a small proportion of people who are opposed now. They can be very loud, but I think, like with many things, our cat population has grown so much. I mean, it went up by 1/3 just through COVID when people got COVID pets. It's over 5 million now. So we do have to start thinking about this as being a big scale problem, and why we can't just keep doing what we did 10 years ago and 20 years ago. In the same way that with dogs, you know, when I grew up, dogs used to roam the suburbs. I just remember, you know, dogs wandering around up and down the street and going off with their mates, getting in packs. We don't accept that with dogs anymore, and I think that's where we're going to have to head with cats, and it's a matter of how fast we get on board with that, and whether or not politicians have enough spine to push it through.
Thanks, Diana. I think that control of domesticated cats, making sure they don't get out, you also stop that source of feral cats as well if they're kept indoors. So we potentially have a solution there for the domesticated cats. Phil, coming back to you for the feral cats. We've heard to the lengths that Ali goes to with CDs and feather boas or whatever to do that. What are some of the other technology pieces that are potentially on the horizon to help with cat control? Or suppression or extinction?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think, you know, suppression is probably what we're looking at. We're looking at asset protection. So we're looking at groups like AWC who take it very seriously. We have an increasing amount of conservation estate in private or NGO ownership. I don't think we can leave it up to our government, unfortunately. Probably can't leave much up to our government. But we do need to identify the problem that, you know, the public don't know a lot of our native species. We heard that in the episode. We need these species that have become extinct to be more visible, and we need to take some ownership and pride over those, and recognise that, like you said, there's 2 different species here. Keeping the domestic cats inside is going to make a huge difference, but attacking the feral cat populations at a smaller scale, not at a landscape scale, because we just don't have the tools. We're not going to start releasing viruses, not in the near future, like we have with rabbits, and we see with rabbits anyway that, you know, it's a constant arms race, and the viruses aren't enough at the national landscape. We do see eradication in natural areas. Macquarie Island, we saw both cats and rabbits removed, but they had to throw an enormous toolbox at that. We do have individual tools that we can combine, but there is no single effective solution. Genetic editing is being proposed for some mammal populations, and we do see some potential positive signs with that, but not in the near future, and probably the social license for that with cats is going to be very, very difficult to get as well.
Because it could potentially get into domesticated cats as well.
Well, that's right. I mean, one of the advantages of ownership of domestic cats is that they are all sterilised, maybe not all of them, but most responsible ownership. And if you're registering your cat, it gets sterilised. So that's a huge step. But we currently don't have the technologies for doing that amongst feral populations.
So there's no easy solution really for cats.
We could eat them.
We could eat them. let me come on to that point,
okay.
Because I think we had quite a range of feedback about the programme. A lot of it, most of it, was very good. I got feedback from people in the Federal Department for Environment and also state-based environments saying they appreciated that the messaging was repackaged in a new way, but also that a balanced approach had been taken to the series. But there was criticism around whether the series is actually overly promoting the eating of invasive species, and therefore the danger of that is that you generate a market for that, and then perversely, you conserve those species because you conserve them for a market. I think I'd probably question back to the panel. Did you feel you had good opportunity to put into the programme your scientific knowledge, and did you feel that was well reflected within the programme that you participated in?
I would say, yeah, that was, it was an interesting experience, but it covers basically what we feel, that it's not the end solution, it's not the golden bullet, but it starts a conversation, which it definitely has from my Instagram comments.
It definitely has started a conversation, which I think is also the point of it, because
Absolutely.
the conversation had become stale, and then it's reignited the conversation. Jana, were you happy with your...
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't advocating a market for eating pet cats, so, didn't have to talk about that in a great nuance. But, I think overall, having dealt with the producers a lot, we really saw, the Biodiversity Council really saw the value in bringing new sets of eyeballs to thinking about invasive animal problems in Australia. We could see that they went to a lot of effort to look at the complexity of the situations, and as you can see in the cat one, they certainly didn't. I don't think anyone would walk away from having watched that thinking they're saying that that's the big solution. And as long as people don't only read the headline, don't watch the program and assume that it's the big silver bullet, then I don't think we have an issue. And I mean, even long before this program, there have been lots of voices in the community saying, we just need to eat them.
Yep.
And I have certainly come across that a lot, and people saying, why don't we just eat them? Not for cats, but for lots of other things. And so I think in many ways the show was really valuable in exploring the issues about, in many cases, why eating them and creating a market is not a silver bullet. So I'd say it was quite effective in that way.
Yeah, great. And Phil, you were happy with our presentation? We got the sciencey bit, didn't we?
We got to spend a lot of time together, Andy.
Yeah, that's right.
I loved the experience. It was, and to see it come out, I think has been great. The interesting thing is that we've heard people mention silver bullets a lot, and with a lot of these species, there isn't one. We don't have a single tool in the toolbox. We have to throw so many different methods and approaches at them, and we're not succeeding. So we're seeing a lot of these species increase in abundance, and their impacts increase, and so we do have to start to raise awareness and to look at what alternatives there can be for some of these species. And cats were not introduced as consumable items, but a lot of the other species in the episodes were, And if you do watch the deer episode, I think that's the one place where we really see that controversy worked out. And I'd encourage you to watch that because it's a very complicated argument.
It is, yeah. So we're going to throw over to the audience in a minute, but I'm going to ask you guys one last question. It's going to be a two-part question. I think first one is, what would be recommendations to the audience of what they can do in relation to invasive species, and probably in relation to where your work is coming from. And the second one is, if you were given a choice, which invasive species would you eat?
So I work for the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. We have a volunteer page. You can put your profile up and then just add it to whatever is available. We would love your help with a lot of the stuff we do. So it's not all getting rid of cats. There's some exciting things like looking at poo and catching bilbies, and all of that helps to save animals. I couldn't say that cat was the most delicious animal I've ever eaten. But it was very unflavoured. It was literally just on a fire. So maybe if somebody could make a proper menu with cat, that would be up there. The best...
And it was kind of a revenge feast, wasn't it?
Yeah, felt good. I feel like the best invasive species I've eaten has been camel. So, yeah. Camels you can get from a lot of butchers if you Google. There's places in Adelaide, so...
Yep. But we do want to eliminate camel, not keep it on... Anyway, yeah. Yana.
I think one of the most effective things that people can do with all invasive species is actually to use their voices to tell their local members of parliament that they think that this is a big deal and they want to see more action from the government. Because really, the government puts peanuts, especially the federal government, but also state governments, peanuts towards the management of the environment.
Right, and that's why we've got the problem that we're in, because it's not properly supported and managed, right?
Yeah. So contributing and saying that you want this, supporting groups like the Invasive Species Council who lobby on this sort of thing, that can be useful. Like if they've got a campaign around getting horses out of the high country and you can sign up to a campaign like that, it's about adding your voices to show the politicians that you think this sort of thing is important. That is really important. And I mean, if you are a cat owner, keep your cat contained. Get your cat desexed. If you have friends who won't keep their cats in, but you can at least convince them to desex their cat, that's a real win. Australia puts down about 50,000 healthy cats per year in shelters. We have a massive cat oversupply problem, and some of those cats end up in the sort of stray, semi-owned population in our suburbs and just contribute to the problem, and then each one of those cats will keep breeding at a really rapid rate. So getting down the number of cats that we've got in the landscape through, they're the easy ones. The ones in our urban areas, they're actually the really easy ones to control, but it takes a certain amount of political spine to do it. So actually on that, today I spent half the day at South Australian Government's stakeholder workshop for a new statewide cat strategy. So the South Australian Government is looking at this. And this is the kind of thing, though, that I mentioned that 8% of people who don't think they should have to keep their cats in situations like that, often the people who are pro, let my kitty do whatever it wants, that's its instinct, I want to let them, they are going to be really loud voices when governments and local councils try to put something through. So if you care about wildlife in your area and you actually think people should be managing their pet cats and stopping their impact, making sure that when processes like that happen, you also contribute and say, no, I support this. I think that we should have to keep our cats contained. That's actually really powerful.
Yep. And favourite invasive species?
I don't have one, but I want to relay a short anecdote. I once went to a Kimberley Land Council Ranger Forum and there was a camp oven cook-off. And and all the different ranger teams made a different dish, and there were a lot of invasive species. There was lots of feral pig and buffalo and some other native species that I would never have eaten before, like bustard, which is a lot of rangers in the north would love. And I was very excited to learn what all these different things tasted like. but it was outside and it was a very moonless night. And so by the time you got a scoop of this and a scoop of that and a scoop of that and a scoop of the other, and then you walked away to where the tables were in the pitch dark, I ate so many invasive species, but I couldn't tell you which one was which. So I really don't know which was the most delicious.
So a medley of invasive species. And Phil?
So we've heard about investing in land management programs and supporting local and regional NGOs. We've heard about lobbying. I'm assuming that most of the people are here because they're already on side. But you've got friends, you've got families. Go and encourage them to build awareness, because that's the other part of it, as well as the doing the on-ground work, as well as lobbying the political parties. We also need to raise awareness. So, work with your broader communities, your neighbours, talk to them about it. Hell, get them to watch the show. And I'm a New Zealander, so brush-tailed possum.
Okay, round of applause for the panel. Okay, so now we'll throw it open for a brief Q&A. We're ready to take some questions. Put the questions down. I can direct them towards a panel member. We'll see how we go. Was there one here? Let's start over here.
Speak right to the mic, okay?
Is there any other invasive species that you're thinking to put on the episodes or eat?
That's a good question. Matt and Poppy. Yeah, if Series 2, what species would you have in Series 2 if there was a Series 2? There are ostriches.
There are ostriches out there somewhere. I heard about this story that we were farming them in the 80s. Was that right, Poppy? I got obsessed by the idea of an ostrich and hunting one down and eating one. So, yeah, if we get a Series 2, I wanted to do ostriches. But pig, goat. I think we export more goat than anyone else in the world. Poppy, you know more than I do. Here you go.
I think that was right. Pig and goat were two big ones. Donkeys.
Foxes.
Foxes. We did
camel. Did you not watch the programme?
But wait. Here's the chance for your audience to help shape the next episode.
Exactly.
Young man, what would you like to see in the series? Can you think of another invasive species you think they should do?
Well, to be honest, have you done foxes yet?
No, we haven't done foxes, but I think
Good
we should
one.
do foxes. Yeah. I think I'd like to see blackberries in there, because some of these species, some of them provide a benefit and a negative, and so that's the problem with many of these invasive species. They are here to stay in some cases, and they've usurped many of our native species that have then gone extinct, so it's a really complex issue. I had a question in the middle here. Sorry. There we go. Thanks, Jen.
Hi. Yeah, really interesting. I guess part of the thing is all around the public comms, and I was wondering if there's any resources that are tied to the program, like a website or anything about some easily digestible facts. Obviously there's a lot of academic research, but things like, I was really interested in the cats. What's the population distribution and its growth? The fact that you said that it's gone up by a third, 5 million is just huge. So where does it go to? What happens if nothing's done, I guess? Thanks.
So it sounds like a fact sheet produced by would be a good idea. Yeah.
Well,
Phil?
Yes, there's a number of groups. I'll let Jana talk to the Biodiversity Council, but certainly the Invasive Animals, CRC, and its Centre for Invasive Species Solutions has an enormous amount of information that's very digestible through its website. So I would recommend that they have a Pest Smart program where they have produced a large number of fact sheets, as well as a feral pest distribution mapping tool, which is very accessible. So I'd recommend you going to those resources.
And if you particularly want a synthesis of the cat research, on the Biodiversity Council website, we've got a fact sheet, plain language fact sheet that synthesises a lot of research that's been done within Australia and internationally that you'll probably find really useful.
Great. Okay, we've got a question in the back here. Marina, how are we doing for time? We're good, yeah, okay.
Jana, you spoke earlier about the conference you went to. Is the state government, I mean, generally the dogs and cats are controlled by local government, and they're the ones who either put in place some strategies, particularly for cats, or don't, and yet you spoke that the South Australian government was looking to have a statewide impact on that.
I think Anne is in the room if she wants to run down and answer this question. Put your hand up. No, can't see her. There was someone there here who, yes, this woman will answer your question.
Anna, that's okay. Hi. Yeah,
Anna.
we're working with the state government on this statewide cat management strategy, and it's looking at thinking about what can all the stakeholders that have responsibilities for cats do. So from local government, state government, cat owners, conservation organisations, welfare groups. So it's really right at the very beginning of the process, and there was a stakeholder workshop today, but it will be released for public consultation hopefully in the middle of the year, and that is the opportunity which the general public then will get to share their support or otherwise for what's included in it. So it needs to be an integrated approach, and the aim is to get everyone to a point where all the different views get close enough to be able to agree on what the future needs to look like as well, because it's certainly a very divergent range of views of what should be done with cats as well. So that we're here tonight to hear this perspective, but I think that the episode certainly brings up the issues that the cat management strategy is going to be looking at.
Great.
Thank you.
Another question at the back there?
Thanks for the great insight so far. Do other countries face these sorts of issues with invasive species such as cats, and do they do anything differently to how we try and manage the populations?
I think I might throw this one to Phil. I think New Zealand has the worst invasive species problem in the world, isn't it?
Well, we've got to be good at something. Aside from rugby. So yeah, it really is a global problem. And for the first time recently, there was a global assessment of the impacts of invasive species. And we're seeing 200 new species introduced somewhere in the world every year. We have over 30,000 established species that are causing some impact, whether it's to people, to the environments, to economies. Australia is particularly highlighted because of it being, colonisation being quite recent, and so we have seen the impact of these species very much in the last couple of generations. Australia is not alone, and in fact Australia has quite a good record in a number of cases for dealing with invasive species and for its biosecurity, as you know, anyone who travels through it. But it really is a global issue, and every country is facing similar issues.
Hey, thank you. Imogen Ebsworth. I'm actually from the Invasive Species Council, so I spent the morning with Anna and Jana and a whole bunch of other people talking about the cat management strategy for South Australia, which was excellent. But my question's probably a little bit more tricky in that I love the series in terms of just raising huge awareness in Australia for a lot of people around invasive species. But one of the things I think we struggled with as an organisation is if I sort of work through some of the examples, the rabbit fur industry really resisted the release of myxomatosis and calicivirus to control rabbits because they had a market in rabbit fur. We had quite a successful attempt at controlling invasive camels that kind of got derailed by looking at whether we could have a market in camel meat. Pigs and deer get spread into new areas by hunters because there's a vested interest in continuing to hunt those animals. So I guess my question back to the panel is, as wonderful as this series is to really spark conversation, isn't there dangers in suggesting that a market-based approach is the way to go?
Can I add to that? Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, well, not absolutely that the series is a problem. Absolutely, establishing markets There might be very limited cases in which it could be effective, and maybe the species is already at its maximum distribution and really things can't get anything worse, and maybe by using that species you could alleviate another problem. Imagine if we could substitute carp into every fish and chip shop. And imagine the way that could alleviate pressure off fisheries in an age where we don't really have an effective control for carp yet. So there are some cases in which I think we might have to take a strategic approach, but I think markets in themselves are quite risky when you let that sort of the cat out of the bag, because they have a way of wanting to perpetuate themselves. We've certainly seen that with goats in Australia. I've stayed on sheep properties in Western New South Wales, where the pastoralists were getting quite a lot of their income from goats. They'd set up quite sophisticated yards around dams with one-way gates, because it's very hard to fence goats, where goats can make their way in. But then when they've got an abattoir, well, they would let them come and go, and then when they want to do a roundup and the abattoir truck is coming, they would shut the gate and until it would fill up with 1,000 goats or something like that. But they told me they would deliberately go out on the day the truck comes and turn the young nannies and kids back out in the landscape, because goats are just too lucrative. So that's kind of, I think that really exemplifies the problem you can have with a market. Farmers could reduce the impact of goats on the landscape, and they can really hammer landscapes. You go into some areas, particularly in drought, and there isn't a blade of anything left up to the height that a goat can stand on its back when it's standing on its back legs. But when there's a market and people have invested in the infrastructure and they've made it part of their cash flow, getting them to give up on that is very hard. And the issue, like you mentioned, with releases of diseases, I mean, that's a real concern I would have about establishing food markets based around wild rabbit, in that people might start saying, well, we don't want you to release biological controls because we don't like the idea of eating an unhealthy or sick rabbit. We want healthy rabbits so we can go out and collect them, even though before we had the biocontrols, when in an age where people did consume a lot more rabbits, it didn't even make a dent on the rabbit population. It was still going up exponentially. So in that sense, I'm certainly not opposed to the idea of eating invasive species, and people going out and love the idea of someone going out and shooting their own rabbit in Victoria if they've got a farm, rather than going down to the shops and buying a frozen chook. But we shouldn't imagine that would be just a magical way that suddenly everyone will start eating them and so they'll disappear from the landscape, because it just doesn't.
No. Okay. Any other questions? All good. Michael.
Just a quick question on the federal funding issue. You touched on how there's...
Sorry.
It seems like there's woefully...
Sorry, there you go.
Sure, I'm pretty loud anyway. Look, just a quick question on the federal funding issue, and what sort of proportion of the federal budget is spent on nature?
Thank you, and I didn't pay him for that question earlier. The federal government spends 1,000th of the federal budget on conservation actions, so $1 in every $1,000. Based on a synthesis of a lot of different research that has looked at what would be a realistic estimate of what it would take to do just a reasonable, definitely not gold-plated job of managing the environment in terms of preventing extinctions, recovering, not to their former glory, but just keeping threatened species in the game, restoring degraded lands. We've estimated that the federal government should be spending 1% of the federal budget on nature. That would actually make an enormous difference to how effectively we manage the environment and the kind of condition and quality we can leave that environment for future generations. And if anybody says to you, and which hospital or school do you want that money to come from? Well, the government currently spends 4% of the federal budget on subsidising activities that are harmful for nature, like subsidies for fossil fuels and things like that. And so actually it's just about choices. If the government ever tells you they don't have the money, it's just that they're choosing to potentially invest something that's actually quite harmful, and that actually, according to international obligations we've signed up to under the Global Biodiversity Framework, we are obliged to identify and phase out those subsidies. So potentially 4% of the budget coming up.
Okay, I think we'll Okay, one more quick one.
Hey, thanks everyone. I've had the privilege of working with a Kirakara mob up in WA, and I know that, I understand Eat the Invaders, it's a good way to get people's attention, but they also have a price on Indigenous people can catch a cat and cut the ear off, and they'll get $150 for it, and they'll get $250 for a fox's ear. I know that in Central Australia you can go to the local council and you can get a cat trap and you can cat any feral cats around your neighbourhood. I'm not sure what the systems are around Adelaide, but I feel like that's a good way for people to be able to feel like they're actually having an impact, being able to catch those feral cats and give them to the council and say, you can figure out if you want to find the owner or not, but I'm not bloody doing it. And what do you think about those processes, and is there any capacity for that to have any impact on more urbanised areas?
So I think that's a really good point, and certainly the landscape board structure here in South Australia, you can actually get on loan, you can get traps, actually for foxes, not for feral cats in the hills and Fluria and in the city region. I'm not sure about in the rural and arid regions. I think, but certainly those landscape boards, one of their primary activities is around feral animal and plant pest control, also involved in a lot of roadside verge control of weeds. So I think that the landscape boards are there to help, and councils can help in ways, particularly around some of the domesticated and feral cats. Any other examples here?
Someone mentioned to me at the workshop today, and so I'm hearing this secondhand, so there's a chance that I've lost something in translation, but mentioned that you can get traps in Adelaide, like you can, I don't know if it's from the landscape board or from the council, but you can get a cat if you've got a problem cat around, but then the problem is, what do you do with that? They don't just take it back from you. You're supposed to take it to a vet or something like that. And then a lot of vets don't want you to give them a cage with a mad feral cat. So I think they're the kinds of things that hopefully the South Australian cat strategy will resolve, because there was definitely a lot of recognition that there are lots of groups in this space, and it has to be very coordinated and clear for how the different types of cats are going to need to be managed.
Okay, that was the last question. Now we are filming this event, and we will put it up on our website. If you registered, we'll send you the links to that, and we'll also put some of the links up for the discussions that we had today. Centre for Invasive Species Solutions, Biodiversity Council, links to AWC. Also, if you want to see the other episodes in the series, it's on ABC iView, so it's available free to watch. And we also did a podcast with Matt and Poppy on ecofuturists to get insight from the creators and directors of the programme, what inspired them to bring this to air as well. But I just wanted to thank Laura, Ali, Jana and Phil, and also to Marina, Monica, Jen and Marilia and the team for helping organise tonight, and Nelson for filming. Thanks so much for a spectacular evening.